off. She was dying to tell you all about her work. But as she said, she will have many opportunities to do so since she's the project director and you will be seeing her for years. So we have our panelists here, and in the interest of time, I'm going to let them introduce themselves as they stand to give the presentation. You have their names in your agenda, and some of them, just like yesterday, are doing PowerPoint, some are not. But we will start with Adam, and if you don't mind to just do it here at the podium, because we do have a mic set up to capture everything. This is your 1 minute notice. I will be flashing.
How close do I have to get to this mic?
You could be pretty far from it.
Okay, good. Hello, so I'm Adam Privatira. I am the program chair of psychology at Chemeketa Community College, and I am involved in the Build EXITO program as a coordinator at Chemeketa. My talk's going to be a little odd because I don't actually have an active involvement in my field of research anymore. I've got a subtle involvement, but I come from a very interesting field, in my opinion, because it involves a blending of pretty much every field you can imagine into something that gives you an endless amount of fun research questions. I come from the field of what is called behavioral neuroscience. So in a pure sense, it's where biology and psychology intersect. Initially, I had no idea, kind of going back to the hidden part of the Tahari window, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I wanted to be, I think, a caterpillar when I was a tiny child, and then moved into wanting to be a police officer, and eventually decided on wanting to do research after I joined the military and got involved in understanding how the military was addressing research concerning drug addiction and PTSD. From my first classes at Niagara County Community College in New York, I got an understanding of how far psychology can be stretched to ask a variety of questions. And as I moved into the University of Buffalo, I had the opportunity to apply for a position as an undergraduate researcher, unpaid, looking at what are called endocannabinoids, which is, for lack of a better description, your body's natural THC. Through this, I was introduced to my academic advisor, Dr. Alexis Thompson, who gave me my first actual interaction with inequality in the world of science. So Dr. Thompson was brilliant, phenomenal scientist, but had come under a lot of negative pressure because she was in a male-dominated field and was trying to do things that turned the research on its head. She was actually forced to sign a contract as a postdoc that said that should she ever get pregnant, she would end her career. You can't legally do that. I don't think you could ever legally do that, but it exposed me to just how cruel science can be, which got me interested in programs like this. Everyone has the potential, if you're interested and you want to do that, to do research, and nothing should limit you in that regard. But to give you a little background on kind of the research that I did, I focused on how drugs of addiction, particularly crystal meth and cocaine, impact social behavior, using rats as a model. Tying it back to psychology, we looked at the brain. So the way it worked is you give rats a drug, you look to see other behavior changes, and then you take the brain and you look to see what's changing in the brain. It is very interesting to be able to tie within one organism behavioral changes to biological changes in the brain. That's initially what sucked me in. Not only was I doing something that was really cool behaviorally, but I was able to look at the brain and see what had originally changed. Part of my research addressed what the military was doing with the treatment of PTSD using a derivative of MDMA, which is 3,4-methylene dioxymethamphetamine, or Molly. It's a club drug, makes you social, makes you want to touch everyone, listen to dubstep, stuff like that. The military wanted to use it to treat PTSD. They thought it made you more social, but my graduate thesis was on how that actually undermines social behavior and makes you more phobic of social stimuli long term. I know that some of you in this room, I can only speak to the students I've spoken to so far, are interested in doing kind of something where psychology meets another field, and this is one of those fields that I know there's active research at OHSU on. It's an amazing career field, and it's really, to be able to cut open a brain, to do something to it, and to have that organism come back to life is amazing. It's probably the most interesting field I've ever encountered. I'm biased, obviously, but really that's the field I came from. I'm no longer actively involved. I'm writing a paper right now for publication, but you can't walk down the street and buy rats, set up a cocaine treatment program in your apartment. It's not legal. So I guess I don't know how this works. Do they ask questions at this point? Okay, so really that's my background and the end.
Hi, I'm Kelly Gonzalez. Where am I? I am an assistant professor in the school's community health. I came to Portland State University the same year Dawn was hired. So, let's see. So I am first generation college graduate. No, I'm actually the first person in my family to go to college. I tell people all the time that when I was in school, my family used to call me my mom, and she would say, when I was an undergrad, "When are you coming home to marry your high school sweetheart? Why are you going to school? We don't do this." So, but I kept going forward, and I earned a PhD in 2010 in public health. I did 2 years of postdoc work at the Centers for American Indian Alaska Native Research in Colorado, the University of Colorado, Denver. And the beautiful thing about that experience was it was a cohort of Native American scholars like myself who were being mentored by Native American researchers. And that was the first experience I really had being in that kind of environment. It was really powerful for me, and also incredibly very intense, because they were trying to help us become more researchers along the lines of National Institute of Health. But we also wanted to talk about the heart of our community in our research. So, right, I was really learning how to weave together the indigenous background that really fuels my work and my connection with community with the science, the Western-based science. And so I had the opportunity to learn that skill at the University of Colorado in my postdoc work. So I'm really fortunate and I'm grateful for that experience. So my work does focus on Native American health. I'm inspired to do this work because I'm Native American, and I'm doing this work to really lift up my community, and also to do work in a way that is responsive to my community. When I decided to go to school to get the PhD, I realized at that time that there wasn't a lot of literature that was speaking to the truth and experiences of my life and community life. So at that time I was doing work in diabetes, and the message was, eat right, exercise, and you can prevent diabetes. And that really was great. But when you're living on a reservation with no grocery store and no access to fruits and vegetables and intense poverty and even violence, it makes diabetes prevention much more complicated. And so I wanted to look at some of those other issues that might also be really difficult and emotionally draining for me even to look at. So when I went and got my PhD, what I did first was I went to the community to ask them, what would you like me to research? What would you like me to study? And what they guided me in was an area that I completely didn't expect to get into, which was looking at racism and the impact it has on diabetes management or even diabetes prevention, and more specifically, healthcare experiences. And when that was brought to me through focus group work that we did and sitting with the community, I actually went back and had to think about it for about 4 or 5 months before I could commit to that line of research, because I didn't know if I had what it took to actually do that work. At that time, there wasn't any literature published on that topic for Native Americans. So it was really important that I think about my own capacity to do that work. So since then, I've kind of expanded my work, and here it is listed for you. I'm doing a lot more work on women's health and reproductive justice, and I have several partners. I've just listed them for you because we can't do this work on our own, right? So in addition to community, I'm working with state agencies, universities, my colleagues like Dawn, who are also helping me to do better research. And my work is really based on these core values and principles that community voice is woven throughout all the work I do, that the work I do is based on strong partnerships and that we really embody and respect indigenous knowledge and Western science together. Yay! Okay. Here we go.
Yourself to your environment. I do a job back there. Marilyn, would you like to go next?
Sure. Would you like? Oh, no, I would wait for my plate to come in. That's the old-fashioned way.
It doesn't get fancier than this.
So, I didn't think about talking about myself at all. I thought I would tell you about what my students do in my research lab. But I'll take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm Trinidadian. I grew up in the West Indies. I lived there for about 16 years. And then my parents, and my tongue is going on by itself. My parents moved to New York City when I was 16. And I went to school, 2 years of high school there, and I thought it was miserable. And then I went to college, and I thought everything changed. So I got a degree in chemistry and one in psychology because I was really interested in behavioral neuroscience, but I was more interested in it from the chemistry aspect and how it influences behavior and diseases and neurodegeneration. So I lived in New York City, finished college, and then I went to Texas to get my PhD in chemistry. My dad wanted me to go to med school, and I said, no, I don't think that's going to work out, because I don't want to deal with blood and people and stuff. I like inanimate things that won't talk back to you or cry. And I wanted to make a difference in terms of developing new technologies that improve health and the environment and energy. So that has always been things that I've been interested in because it kind of related back to my life. So I went to Texas A&M and spent 5 grueling years in the hot sun. Mostly I was in the lab. I didn't like to go outside very much because I don't like being hot for some odd reason. But I got a PhD in chemistry in inorganic chemistry. And I really enjoyed my experience there, and I had really good mentors that helped support me. I could not have gone and gotten a PhD if it wasn't for undergraduate research. The research that I did was materials-based, and it got sponsored by a similar NIH program called the Mark MBRS program, which gave me the opportunity to do research and get paid to do research, so I didn't have a second job. So I'm happy that we have this Build the EXITO program because I think it's going to change research for students. And I'm really happy that we have it. And I'm excited to participate in this program. So about 7 years ago, I moved to Portland with my husband, and I started working at Intel, and I hated my job so much. His job was great. I didn't like what I was doing because I didn't feel it connected me back to chemistry and to solving problems that I was interested in. And so I started a postdoctoral position right on campus in the chemistry department in nanomaterials technology, and I didn't have a clue what nano was about. But I figured, okay, it's new and it's challenging, I'll learn about it. And so a year into that, my postdoctoral advisor left, and I had to think about what kind of research I wanted to do with my future. And I went back again to energy and the environment and health. So in my group, we work on designing new nanomaterials for biomedical applications. And I'm just going to go through these really fast. They look pretty, and I thought I'll put them up there. But these are all projects my students, my undergraduate students do in my lab. And my entire lab is all undergraduate students. There's no graduate students, there's no postdoc. So this is the types of things they build. We build nanomaterials with membranes on the surface. And the reason we build these is so that we can study how proteins and peptides interact with those membranes and change their stability, because that plays a role in different types of diseases like Alzheimer's. So we build these biomimetic systems to study them, because if you think about a neuron or cell-based system, they're really complex, and how do you study them? So we try to make simpler models that give us answers to different types of questions. We also use the same type of technology to deliver, our plan is to deliver drugs in the image the delivery of those drugs. So here's another example, the same type of nanomaterials where we're targeting them towards cancer applications. And then we also, instead of membranes, we put peptides on the surface. And in this example, the idea is to put these chelator ligands, which are molecules that capture metals. And the idea is to use these nanoparticles to image iron chelation in a cancer cell, because iron plays a significant role in tumor development, and cell proliferation. So if we can remove the iron, we can shut down tumor growth. And we want to be able to image the tumor response to removal of the iron. So this is one type of nanoparticle that my students work on building. And the last one is not nanoparticle based at all, but it's this idea of developing a high throughput screening assay to screen drugs that could be used for Alzheimer's disease treatment. And so my students are we've built the assay, and we're now in the phase of testing the assay to screen hundreds of drugs to reverse the activity of this particular peptide involved in Alzheimer's disease. So this is the last project that we're doing, and there's other ones, but these are the ones that my students work. So I've worked with a number of students over the years, and all of them have gone on to pursue either graduate degrees or gone on in chemistry or mechanical engineering, and even medicine. So I can't do any of this without those students, and they're the best part of my day. It's coming into the lab and working with them, and I can't do anything without them. They're invaluable. And I think that's it.
Thank you.
I'm Marguerite Matthews. I am a postdoctoral fellow at Oregon Health and Science University. Does anybody know what a postdoc is? Ever heard of it? Okay. So basically it means I went to school a really long time. And I'm still not really an adult scientist yet. I'm like a teenager scientist. So I got my PhD a couple of years ago, and I came to OHSU to work with this gentleman to my left, to work in his lab, and he'll tell you a little bit more about what we do specifically. So I'm still kind of in a training. So for those of you who know about residents, medical residents, it's kind of comparable. You get an MD, but you're not really a doctor. No one's really going to allow you to see patients on your own. You still have to have a little bit of supervision. So that's kind of where I am in my stage of my career. So since I'm a little bit, I think, closer to your stage, I thought I'd talk a little bit about my journey to getting my PhD and being here at OHSU in my postdoc. I went to Spelman College, which is a historically black women's college, about 2,000 students. It's in Atlanta, Georgia. I got my bachelor's in biochemistry. And thankfully there, I had the opportunity to do a lot of research. I did some research within my department with the faculty, working on synthetic chemistry. I made similar particles as to what Marilyn was talking about. I didn't really like it though. It wasn't really my interest. I had done some neuroscience work in high school that I really, really liked. I just thought the brain was fascinating. And so I did a few other internships during my summers. Actually, every summer after I started college, every summer after my junior year of high school, I did some sort of research, either at the Salk Institute, which is in San Diego, where I'm from originally, at Duke University, and I got a fellowship from the UNCF Merck collaboration that Damien has also received, and so I had the opportunity to do work at a research and development lab at Merck, working on Alzheimer's disease. So I really solidified my interest in neuroscience, but I still didn't think I wanted to go get a PhD. I thought I was going to go to medical school. As you can see, I was involved in the Health Careers Club. And I applied and I went on the interviews, and I just realized not only do I not like blood, and I don't really think I like people enough to deal with all their problems, but being a doctor sounds important, right? And so I just thought, like, let me just go for it. My dad also was really like, go do it. And then I got to the interviews and I was like, I don't want to be like these medical students that I'm like talking with. They seem really like boring people and miserable. Like they don't really seem happy. So I kind of stumbled into a PhD. I know that sounds weird, but I did. I really just that wasn't part of my plan. So I ended up getting recruited. Oh yeah. It's nothing you ever prepared for before. So even all the training you're getting, you might get to grad school and like be in tears. Just because it's different. I mean, it's a different experience. It's really a different experience. And again, I did not plan to go to grad school, so I didn't really do my research. You guys will probably be way better prepared through this program than I was. Even though I had done research, I was not grad school minded, so I didn't know what questions to ask, what things to really think about. So I got recruited to Pittsburgh to go to school. I got my PhD in neuroscience. And I didn't put a picture of my mentor here. My mentor is a woman. She's Iranian, so she's also possibly considered a minority. I'm not quite sure if she'd be an underrepresented minority, but I worked in rats, studying brain development, and this was really a very transitional period for me. I really grew as a person. And again, I didn't really plan to get a PhD, and so I wasn't sure what I was getting myself into, so I had a lot of self-doubt, which you may very well experience, but it really, really helped build me as a person. And I really felt like, I now feel like I can do anything. I can conquer the world, not because I have a PhD, but because I've had different experiences. So this is the current lab that I work in. As you can see, we like to have fun. We are not just in the lab doing serious work. We are also doing other serious work, like coming up with ways to take fun pictures. So our lab does host a lot of undergraduates. This summer we have two undergraduate students and one high school student. And we really, really want to make the experience that you'll have one worth, not just so you'll learn how to do research, but that you'll enjoy it and you'll really feel like you have a place and you're making a difference in the world. And I haven't necessarily done research specific to the communities I care about, but I have been able to do work that I think is important, and also making sure that the students that work with us have a good experience. And if they decide not to go into research, it's not because we scared them away and because they had such a terrible time, but because maybe, hey, this is cool work, I really like the environment that I'm in, but this just isn't the thing for me. So hopefully you guys have that similar experience, and I'm going to be working with some of the research learning communities at OHSU, so if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me.
All right, so I'm David Fair. We gotta talk. I run the Fair Neuroimaging Laboratory in Behavioral Neuroscience at OHSU. I'm not gonna talk about my journey, which led me from your seat to be up in front and talking to you here, but mostly focus on just kind of the research and what we're doing in the lab. I'm assuming that we'll have lots of other times to talk and get to know each other so you can hear about how I got to where I am. All right, so my lab, we use brain imaging to study brain development. In particular, we use functional MRI. Most people are familiar with what functional MRI is. You put someone in a scanner and you have them do some type of task, like open their eyes, and you have them close their eyes, and you have them open their eyes, and close their eyes, and open their eyes, and close their eyes, over and over and over again. And eventually, you can identify the parts of the brain that are active when your eyes are open, like the visual cortex here, versus when they're closed. Now, one of the questions that sometimes folks ask, why do I have to do the task so many different times to be able to get that signal that I'm looking at with the MRI machine? And the reason is because there's lots of noise in the signal. Now this guy, who's a colleague and friend by the name of Brad Bisbal back in 1995, which doesn't seem like it's that long ago to me, but for a lot of you here, probably already born, is that he looked at this noise that we see in the signal that we average out of all the MRI studies. And he decided to do like an experiment where he had people just do this finger tapping and then rest, and finger tapping and then rest, and finger tapping and rest. And lo and behold, the parts of the brain that are active in your finger tapping are the motor cortex, as you can see here. And then he took one of those regions and decided to look at just when people are sitting there not doing anything, they're just sitting in the skin, arms folded, not doing anything at all. He take one of those brain regions and correlate it with the rest of the brain. And what he found was that the same brain regions that are active when you're actually doing something are sitting there oscillating with each other when your brain's at rest, not doing anything at all. And what that told us is that this signal that we average out of all of our fMRI studies isn't really noise at all, but it's really important signal that tells us how the brain's organized. And surprisingly, even neuroscientists like myself used to think but the brain acts like a muscle where you're either activating or really squeezing or you rest. And it turns out that the brain's not like that at all. It's always flexed, all the time, your whole life. And this signal, this is why it's always flexed. This is what we study in my lab. We use it with some computational things called graph theory. This is just a picture of some graphs. What is graph theory? Well, graph theory is this study of networks where you can take a collection of nodes, so like people or places or web pages that are linked by some type of line or edge, right? So that'd be like friends between people, like roads between cities, or like links between web pages, right? And so it turns out that this discipline has been used to study all different types of phenomena. So like, this is like networks on the internet. This is like the US commuting patterns. These are a network of how committees and subcommittees in Congress talk to each other or when they're talking to each other. This is how the protein interaction and yeast are interacting. And what you can see from all these pictures, right, is that it's not simply that it's regular, like A connects to B connects to C, right? And it's also not random. There's some clear structure that's in here, right? And so what we do is we use this field to kind of tell us, well, how do you quantify these patterns that you see in these pictures, and what do they mean with regard to how the system is actually functioning? Now for us, our nodes are brain regions, and the connections between those brain regions is this spontaneous correlated activity that we have at rest. And there's lots of different measurements that we have, like degree, that you can say some brain regions are highly connected and some regions are very little connected. There are things like pathways. If I want to get information from this side of the room to this side of the room, how many steps do I need to get over there? There are things like clustering coefficient that says, okay, I have 3 friends, right? How many of my friends are also connected with each other? And we can determine phenomena like the small world system or 6 degrees in Kevin Bacon, right? These are things that we're familiar with, but really we can quantify them with these types of methods. It turns out that small world systems have really high clustering coefficients and very short pathways. It tells us something about how it is that we can use Kevin Bacon as his hub to look at, to link any actor together, right? So in our lab, we study this in terms of the brain. So the brain is also organized like 6 degrees in Kevin Bacon. You can determine like how different parts of the brain are interacting together to form these very specific communities or specific networks, and how these networks are integrated via these what we call these hub parts of the brain. So the hub regions that are really tightly connected with lots of different networks in the system. And it's told us a lot about how, over the last probably recent years, 6 or 7 years, about how the brain is actually organized in these very specific systems. And what we can do now is we can look to see, we can come to PSU and get all the students who have either are control students or kids who have ADHD. We can determine like how the systems are maybe dysregulated in those types of populations. We look at how kids with autism and ADHD controls, how their hub systems are dysregulated. And we can even take animal models and look to see how these different, very specific manipulations relate to this overall large-scale organization of the brain. So this is what my lab, this is what we do. We have lots and lots and lots of projects, and we have to talk to all of you about it more. Thank you.
Wow, how to follow that?
You'll be fine.
So yesterday somebody was talking about quantifying consciousness, right?
Yeah.
So
That was
yeah.
me.
All right, you see.
Yeah.
So a little bit about myself. I have a bachelor in chemistry from Inter-American University in Puerto Rico. My parents, they didn't graduate from elementary school. I'm not saying anything bad about that, but the concept of going to college was a huge priority. I have a master's in exercise physiology from Texas Tech University, and I have a doctor of public health from Loma Linda University in California. I chose those universities because they came from warm weather states, and then I ended up living in Buffalo for 5 years. But you know, it's also everything has to go very, very gradual. Most of the research that I do is around epidemiology, which is the study of distribution of disease in population. And that's somewhat complicated. For my kids, I tell them I follow people until they die. And basically, you just monitor what's happening in populations and what people, when they get sick and when they die, and what are the things that they were doing before they died. With a master's in exercise science, one of my major interests is finding out why people exercise and why people do not. If you ask, I would say 100 people, I would say all of them would tell you that exercise is good for them. I mean, how many of you think exercise is good for you? Okay. How many of you already have exercised 30 minutes today? All right. So the same with smoking. Most people who smoke, they know it's not good for them, but they still do it. So there's something about how much you know about something, and then your behavior. What triggers you? What motivates you to do that? My research has been around the study of exercise in prevention of cancer, and we know that exercise prevents heart disease, and it's hard to get money to study that because we know it. So you need to start looking at things that we don't know. One of the things that we know is that exercise has been helpful to lower risk of breast cancer and also lowers the risk of colon cancer. We have some biological plausibility how it works. My research has been looking at how exercise helps prevent prostate cancer. And after 5 years and almost $500,000, we found that there is no effect. But at least I studied it, and there's a couple of other people who have found the same thing. And that actually helps somebody else to say, well, we don't need to study that anymore. But maybe it does. What we know is exercise, most of the people who want to exercise, they do it because they want to lose weight. And exercise will not make you lose weight. So if you want to learn something, what I said today was, exercise is not going to make you lose weight. It will probably make you gain weight. It helps to prevent weight gain, which is very different from weight loss. But the problem with that is most people who get in an exercise program, after 30 days, if they haven't lose weight, they quit. And there's so many benefits that come to exercise that have nothing to do with body weight. And that's a big part of my research is to, once you control for the impact on body weight, exercise do a lot of stuff, good stuff for you. The other reason people exercise is because they want to look good. And exercise will not make you look good. If you want to look good, you have to choose your parents very carefully. One thing it will do, it will make you feel better, which is great, which is actually one of the main reasons people exercise. It's a big stress management, and they do it, and they don't really care about their health benefits, they just care because it's good for their health. So one of the things that I was able to do, there was this long study started in 1960 where they recruited about 12,000 Puerto Rican men to do a study on exercise. Actually, it was a Puerto Rico heart health program, diet, exercise, body weight, and heart disease. So we have data on these men, and they were followed for about 12, 15 years. And what we did was we have this data on exercise habits and body weight, and we are linking their file with their death certificate. And once you die, you cannot be buried unless you have a death certificate. And death certificate says what's the cause of death. So we know how many of them die of cancer. So we're looking at that association between exercise, body weight, and cancer in these Puerto Rican men. We're also looking at obesity and television watching, and we found that as kids watch more TV, there are higher rates of obesity in children. I like exercise as a method of health disparities reduction because exercise is free. You don't have to buy it. You can do it pretty much anywhere. There are many ways of being physically active, and I find that it's a very effective way to actually empower people to help themselves.
So why don't we take some questions? I'm going to just put this over here. I just really want to say, I think all of you, I think I've done a disservice to you because I think you have the impression that it's very easy to control faculty and get them to do 5-minute presentations. This is actually, we just have a really impressive group of people here. This is not the standard. So yes, you have a question.
I have two questions, but okay, my first one is for David. On your slide,
Well, it depends on which slide, I can't remember which.
It was on 2 of them, I thought.
Okay, so there's probably one where we have, there's an equation that you can, if you take a graph, like the ones I was kind of showing you up there, like the pictures of the internet, right? There's some equations that you can optimize how you would demarcate that into specific groups or cliques, right? And it's called community detection. That's probably the one you're talking about.
Specifically for the brain, like how?
If this is not specifically for the brain, it can be used in anything to study social, even like your interactions today. You can probably turn this whole room into a graph and identify clusters of folks who have similar types of properties. It's a really interesting, it's actually, I don't want to get too long-winded here, but it's a very fascinating phenomenon because the reality is that if you have like 3 people in this room, there's only 6 different ways that you can subdivide those into different groups. So there's 10 people in the room, there's over 21,000 different ways that you can subdivide them into different groups. As soon as there's 20 people, there's 1 billion. As soon as there's 25 people, there's over 1 trillion different ways that you can subdivide into different clusters or different groups. And so mathematically, this is a very, very hard problem. You have to try to identify the optimal one in a big, thinking about, but not using this big supercomputer that they have at the NSA or whatever. Right? Using your desktop. So that's that equation, what it's doing, even though it's kind of small.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Oh, wait, can I ask any?
Well, can we just go on?
Yes.
We can come back. I just
Yeah,
want to make
okay.
sure we have time for other questions as well. Yeah.
So, this is pertaining to using neural imaging, what are like some of the eventual goals to like in other at like the intersection of all of our sciences that we're interested, like how can we potentially use that to,
Yeah.
like here will help with strokes or just
Yeah,
any different forms.
it's a good question. So when I think about the imaging methodology we use here, it's non-invasive, meaning you can do it in humans, you can do it in animals, you can do it wherever, right? And that you can get it very early on in development. So I didn't talk about this kind of stuff, other things that we're doing, but one of the goals, we have lots of goals to try to understand how the brain works and how it develops and all that. But the other one is to identify very, very, very early markers that come way before after the onset of disease. And if you can do that, just like you can use blood sugar to identify the early onset of diabetes, you can identify the early onset of autism or ADHD or whatever using these methodologies, then you have an opportunity to head it off before it happens. And so that's one of the goals, one of the diagnostic things that we're testing to see if we can use the methods for stuff like that.
My question is for Kelly Gonzalez. You mentioned in your PowerPoint that you do work with beta amyloid amyloids, those little fixes that you have. Is that you or is it somebody else?
Maybe.
Oh, that was you. Is that for amyloid plaque regarding Alzheimer's?
Yes. So,
Would you mind restating the question just so everyone can hear?
I believe her question was about beta amyloid peptides.
I just wanted to know a little bit more information about what you were doing with that.
So we are doing a couple of different things. One thing that we're working on is this high throughput screening assay. And what we're using is the beta amyloid peptide itself to look at how it's folding and its interaction with itself or other molecules affect Alzheimer's disease. And what we want to do, so it's known that these peptides tend to interact with themselves and form what are called oligomers that become toxic. They also form plaques, which are usually considered non-toxic. So what we're trying to do is look at these different species and try to reverse their folding. If we can reverse their folding and they are monomeric, which is single peptides, then it can be easily cleared by the brain. So we want to reverse the plaques and the oligomers that form so that we can reverse whatever effects that they have in the brain long term. So there's several drugs that are in clinical phase trials that are designed to remove the beta amyloid from your brain to halt Alzheimer's disease progression. And there's some that are designed to inhibit the formation. And so our assays to try and screen drugs that would do those types of things, either reverse or inhibit them. But also we want to see if we're going to give a patient a drug, that these drugs don't induce the formation of toxic species. So the assay is designed to do those three things to be able to test them.
I actually did similar work at work.
Yes, so Merck actually has several drugs that are in clinical phase trials that are, and I think one company, Biogen, it's got one drug that everybody's like really excited about recently.
Zach?
Actually, this is a question in reference to Adam's presentation, but anyone on the panel is free to answer it. You talked about how one of your mentors had that obviously sexist contract about she couldn't get pregnant or she had to end her career. If you run into something like that, what is the best way to handle it?
As a white male, I have been given a lot of privilege through my progression through graduate school, where I can actually speak to an experience. I did come from a single parent household, low income, but this is what they see. So I've actually never dealt with something like that. I'm not sure if anyone else on this panel can speak to some sort of experience. If it was me, and this is coming from once again a privileged black background, I would blow it up. I would make a huge deal of it because I would want it to stop. But that's me in a position of privilege. I don't know if anyone can speak to.
I actually have a very similar. I'll stand here, but no one's ever asked me to sign a contract, and as you know, I have a constipated 11-month-old, because we talked about this. So I obviously had a child, but it doesn't usually happen. I think in my career, and I don't know if others can attest to this, but it's never that obvious. It's so subtle sometimes, you don't know what happened until days later and possibly years later, and you realize, oh wow, that was oppressive, that was marginalizing, that was whatever. I've had mentors, say to me before I had my child, it's great you're not having a child. I'm a bit older to be having a baby, and they say, it's great you're not having a child, this is going to advance your career. And say it in a way, like there's no shame in saying such a thing, or that it's a good thing to say, right? And I've heard mentors say things like, I'm only focusing on the baby thing because that was the example, but say things like, she had a second baby. It kind of makes us think maybe she's not too serious about tenure. That's a comment I've heard a lot. And I don't know if you have similar things.
I can speak to that. I had an experience in my PhD program, and I had my children. I got pregnant right away, first year of my PhD program, and had two children in my PhD program. And some of my mentors weren't very supportive. One actually said, I've just made the worst decision of my entire life, and I'm going to have to drop out of school, kind of thing. So for me, it was terrifying because I didn't feel like I had a lot of power, and I didn't really understand the system to know how to best advocate for myself. But what I ended up doing was moving forward in that and speaking up. And it's not right? I had given a lot to, I made a lot of sacrifices to get into the PhD program, a lot of dreams and hopes that hinge on that program, and I wasn't going to let certain people get in the way of that. And so I advocated for myself and ended up working out in my best interest, and I ended up getting a different team of mentors to help me out. So yeah, but it was terrifying for me.
Well, and I would also just say, I think what ends up happening for many people, if it's not sort of an obvious thing where someone tells you you've wrecked your career, more like they think they're giving you advice, and you think it's advice, and then you realize, wait, that was terrible advice. What happens is, at least for myself personally, you make a conscious decision that when you have scholars you're working with, you will voice your experiences, even when they're painful, like, telling you that it's funny to joke about, but it's a painful thing when someone tells you your life choices are maybe not good ones. And you work every day to push against a system that tries to force people into these molds that aren't good. And so that's why people are here, to be here and to speak to this, to tell you about the research, but also because they see the value of this particular type of program. Yeah.
So I was just going to say, I think that this particular question is an opportunity to kind of discuss with you about, as you start navigating these waters, that's really important to have more than just one mentor, one person you go to. you have to have other, and EXITO program probably will allow for, multiple, senior figures that'll help you, guide you through your path in your journey, because you do not know necessarily what is in front of you. There's going to be times where this may happen to something like this may happen to any one of you, and it may come from one of your mentors, and so you need to have other folks in your life, professional and academic life, to help you, guide you to navigate through these situations, because they're unlikely to be identical. There's going to be different answers for different situations. So broaden your scope with regard to the folks that you have giving you advice. I think that's a pretty important aspect to be able to answer that type of question.
And on that note, I would also suggest that you find mentors who you feel can add some value to you as a person. Having mentors to help you through your academics and figure out a career is great, but if you don't have someone that you feel like you can relate to, be it someone who shares your experience as being a woman who has a family, or maybe you want a mentor who is a woman who doesn't have a family because maybe that's not what you're interested in, or maybe you're a male and you want to do X, Y, and Z with your life. I think it's really important to sometimes find people who can relate to you on a level that's really important. Or they don't have to necessarily have a shared experience, but they're going to cultivate that experience in you. And I've had a lot of great mentors. I had a white male mentor who made sure, at Merck actually, who at lunch every week I met with a woman because he knew that I wanted to have a family, that I wanted to be a professional, but also have a family, and he paired me up with a bunch of women at Merck to give me their experiences. And so even though he never had that experience as a woman, having babies, he knew that that was important to me and that I would like, and that he could match me up with other people. So I think that is important to have in a mentor. So also just be aware of that. Like, you shouldn't just have a mentor because they're, they're at the stage that you want to be at. You should have someone who cares about you as a person, not just a student, not just a research, someone who's doing research in their lab, but someone who actually cares about, where you are headed in your future and the things that matter the most to you, whatever that might be.
And it's really rare that all exists in one person, and it's actually more ideal, as Damien said, that you are with a panel of mentors throughout your career. And just really quickly, you may have already seen on the schedule, we're going to be having some mentoring workshops this week. We think it's a very, very important part of your training, and so we're having some mentoring workshops in the afternoon, and then also on Thursday and Friday in the morning. Other questions?
I was just going to add something. I think it's important that sometimes you might feel inhibited, that you're afraid to ask someone to be a mentor. What's the worst they're going to say? No. Right? Okay, well, maybe they don't have time. Maybe they're overworked, But I think it's important that you build courage to ask people to be your mentors. And something, I have more than one mentor, and sometimes people don't really know that they're my mentor. I just talk to them anyways. So, yeah, I mean, some people are really busy, but you can learn from example. So I kind of think that they're secret mentors, and they don't know it. It's all right. But because what I'm getting out of the relationship is important to me. And I think it's really important to seek mentors out. And don't think that just because I work in a lab, X is going to be my mentor. I think it's important to have mentors outside of your lab as well, with different experiences. So I've had all kinds of mentors, and I think that's why mentorship is really important to me. And it's something I stress with all students, that as you're going around, you can be mentors yourself. So it's important to mentor other students as well and share your experiences with other students as well, because we all have different backgrounds and different capabilities and different experiences. So talking to each other, and you might not realize this, and some of the students here might be, people you haven't met before, but engage with everybody here, because the relationships you might form here might be really important in the long run, even if they're not in the same field as you are.
Undoubtedly. Yeah, and again, this is all fantastic advice, and I just want you to rest assured we're having 5 hours of training around how to approach mentors, how to identify what you need from a mentor, how to talk to mentors, all of that, and we'll be getting all of that this week. So let's take one more question. Is that Billy? You have your hand up?
Yeah, my question's for Adam. And in your opinion, is the DoD doing enough to address PTSD as a thing, as a real thing, A, and B, as how has the treatment evolved, if at all?
regarding what the DoD does, a lot of that is protected, so you don't get access to a lot of the research that's currently being conducted.
Yeah.
I know that they're looking at another kind of form or metabolite of MDMA for the treatment of PTSD, and I want to say social phobia as well, but that's outside the DoD. So I know that they're still having that discussion. It's just not something that a lot of scientists are privy to, because it just doesn't get discussed. It's classified.
That doesn't sound intelligent, though. Like, for the DoD to not bring in other scientists, it doesn't sound, it's just a question. What do you think?
I don't know if I'm versed enough in the world of doing that kind of research to know whether or not what the DoD, and really in a wider scale, like the protection of certain kinds of research, whether or not that's a good thing. I fall into the camp of thinking that everything should be open access. I hate paywalls on journals. I think that research knowledge should be shared for everyone, because there's a social justice piece to that as well. But I don't know if I'm skilled enough in that field to be able to speak to whether or not the DoD is progressing down a good path. I never worked directly with the DoD. Aside from when I was in the Army.
That's why. Thank you.
Excellent. I want to thank our panel. So we're going to have lunch. Some of our panelists are able to stay for lunch, and I certainly encourage you to avail yourselves of their presence and ask continuing questions. And thank you so much for all